inspired to give today, which is actually a teaching that I wanted to give in October when I was teaching the teachings on the Tree of Life. I think there were 2 or 3 given in October, and I had wanted this to be like the 3rd one or 4th one, depending. And things came up, and it was on my to-do list for this spring. But it sort of channeled through me this morning because it kind of lined up perfectly in conjunction with what I was teaching with the left and right channels in the more yogic teachings that we've been discussing in conjunction with the pranayama. And so I wanted to link the 2 of them. So we are going to shift it into 8th gear this morning. And number 8 is the number of infinity. So I thought it would be very apt that we shift things into the 8th gear and give some context to the spiritual path, and sort of add to what I said last week, kind of finish off those teachings, aspects that I didn't get to, and then launch on how that pertains to the profound teachings of the Tree of Life, which quite frankly I love, because for me exemplifies the spiritual path and helps us understand the route that we need to sort of walk, our highways, right, in better perfecting ourselves, increasing our vibrations, and sort of the trajectory on how we should live our lives in keeping with the divine guidance, and how we just naturally do so when we're in alignment. It becomes effortless because we're in that flow, in that slipstream, and naturally, as our energies become more refined, so does our thinking, and so does our actions. Like a fish. A fish doesn't have to think on how to swim. It naturally does so. So just like us, when we're in alignment, we naturally do everything perfectly, regardless of what we're doing, work, play, at home, talking, even our sleep's in alignment. So let's take a moment and sort of center ourselves. I need to center myself a little bit before I begin. We can call in God. I'm not sure if we're going to get to any pranayama at the end. I think I will try. But so if people are seated down in a chair, that might be best. Or maybe do your alignment in front of your shrine if it's already lit and ready to go. And then maybe move to a chair for a little more comfort. I have notes. And when, as people have been with me for a while, when I say I have notes, that means it's going to be more of a teaching, because this content I want to give, it's important to learn to use the mind. I believe the spiritual religious path should be done through understanding of the wisdom of the past, so it guides us today. Knowledge is power, and knowledge permits us to guide ourselves It empowers us. Knowledge is empowering. Ignorance is not. Right? And by understanding what generations of masters, of practitioners, of religious people have learned, the knowledge they've passed on through tradition from master to student, student becoming the master, passing on to his student. Yes? It comes to us today to help us. So by understanding, we see what we're doing has a purpose, so it reinforces in us the knowledge as to why we're doing things, therefore reinforces our inclination to do it and helps us be strong to kind of push through when we don't feel to do it. Yes, which is normal. It gives us sort of, I'm grasping for the word, let me just, hold on. It solidifies our intent, our desire to follow the path, because we understand how the components, meditation, prayer, study, the names of God, help us along the trajectory which the ancient wisdom people, our ancestors, in a world that had these teachings a little more apparent than the modern world, had set forth for us as sort of guideposts. And then when we run into trouble, energy blocks or energetic releases, we have the knowledge, our mind, to guide us forward. Or when we feel lost, they provide the light to direct our journey towards. So understanding is essential. It's not just I feel to, but I know to. It's both heart and mind and divine guidance. And I think these teachings really show the importance of understanding, because I'm explaining it and you're understanding it. And listening to a few times, it's a lot of information. Today is going to be a lot of technical information. And if you're new to the tree of life, it's going to be something. And I'm going to try to present it in the easiest way possible, clearest way possible, simplest way possible. And it might take a couple times of going through it and what I call chewing on it, contemplating it over time to come to an understanding. But it's really a template of our lives. I've felt in my own journey to understand the path is just essential. It really clears away the uncertainty. All that brush on the road goes away and you clearly see the road and where it goes, and that's just makes things faster and easier and clearer. So let's take a moment and we're going to center ourselves. I'm going to slow down my brain and my energy a little bit so I could carefully explain. So let's just do it together. So I'm going to turn off these lights one moment. I started at 5 in the morning pulling all this together, so one moment. Close your eyes. Center. Back straight. Deep breaths through the nose. Find that inner alignment within, that pivotal place, that center, which I've spoken about, not too far forward, not too far to the left, to the back. Awareness inwards, right? That meditative practice we've been doing. The pranayamas that bring our energy centered and grounded, not disturbed, not scattered, not, what's the word? Disordered, out of order, yes? Sort of a little bit everywhere and not in a sort of organized way, scattered, yeah? I'm trying to give an easier word for non-native speakers, but it's scattered energy, right? So we turn inwards, we close our eyes. People develop the ability, which you will through stretching and pranayama, you're able to turn your energy, higher teaching here, place your conscious mind directly into the central channel and align with that flow which is beyond duality and connects with the infinite. That's if you've aligned your chakras and it flows directly up through the crown. One sense of individuality collapses. One transcends oneself. And that space is clear, open, conscious, innate, that means embedded, that means fully immersed with wisdom, knowledge, compassion, perfection, and it's an action on how to manifest these things. It's the space of divinity that always is connected to us. Without that connection, we wouldn't be alive. And it lives in that perfection within us, that inner cathedral, purified, that's in our hearts. So we put that awareness inwards, and if one has the ability, one feels the central channel and we put it in there. It's more advanced. This takes quite some practice. And clearing one's blockages and aligning the left and the right channels. And then one could start living from that central space. And one can drop into it at will through a conscious intent. Or ultimately just live there permanently if one wishes to. All right? So, relax, breathe. For those who can, flip into that space. Actually, you drop in, but relax into it. One relaxes into that space. Remember, you're not reaching out, it's just you literally drop in. Relax. Put the fingertips together, the right angle of the two hands reaching in the middle, right? And then we call in the divine, the sacred name. Bring that golden energy, pure light energy, different ways to see it. But since we're in the central channel, it's pure, it's luminous, it's light, bright, but soft, but very emanating. And we say the name of God from that space. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Open your eyes. Now you check in. How do you feel? What's different? You don't re-engage your mind, but you just put your awareness and just perceive. You see. You become aware. How is your mind feel? Is it still? Your body, how is it? What's changed in these last couple minutes? You calmer? Do you feel more connected with your body and yourself? And this is how we do an assessment. How we are able to see how we're progressing and how these practices are changing ourselves and our lives and how they affect us. It's a form of feedback. And with time, as the blessings, the alignment, the purification we're going, spiritual, energetic, physical, mental, we start to see how it manifests, you say, off the cushion, off, away from one's prayer space or religious space, into all aspects of our lives, how we manage and live our physical health, our relationships, our actions, our thoughts, our desires, what we wish to do, what we wish to have, our relationship to things, our family, our relationship to money, maybe our relationship to power, our relationship to nature. And we start seeing the shift. And that gives us confidence that we're on the right path, and actually we feel better, we feel happier, we feel more whole, we feel in more alignment. And that gives us fuel on the journey to continue, to go further, to go deeper. Yes? Perfect. Now I feel I'm in a calmer place, to less energetically heightened, to be able to share these very beautiful teachings. I'm sure there's going to be many aha moments. And I think it's really going to connect things. Put on my glasses. I have notes. So, actually, let me open the window a moment again. So fresh air is prana. Remember, air is prana. Air has energy. So by having air that's fresh and less stale, it stimulates our brain, helps us think clearer. And opening curtains brings in light, which stimulates our eyes and makes us more awake. Also stimulates wisdom and awareness, right? So one has to always be aware of one's environment and how it affects us. Okay, so last week we spoke a lot about pranayama. We spoke about the left and right channels, left and right energies, masculine and feminine, right? So for men, to quickly recap, and I'm not going to go too much into a restatement of what I said last week. I don't have time for that this week. So for men, the left is masculine. For women, the right is masculine. For men, the right is feminine. For women, the left is feminine. It's just the channels of men and women are flipped. One is not better than the other. It's just the way things are. Okay? So with the pranayama, men would close the left nostril first, because one exhales through the lunar feminine side. So this is not lined up to men and women. This is just masculine energies and feminine energies. So it's solar and lunar. Nothing to do with the sexes, okay? The attributes of each rest in every single one of us. We all have lunar and we all have solar energies. It's how the two balance, how it affects our energies, which affects our motivations, our thoughts, our thinking, which affects our actions. So we're working at the deepest levels within ourselves. Right? So actions, writing, anything we do, we manifest physically into the world. That's the most external part of ourselves. Thoughts, we make a decision which leads to an action, right? Mental, our brain. Yes? Or subconscious actions, right? So there's a decision at some point in our being which leads to an action, whether we're conscious or not conscious of it, right? Below that is the energy of our body, which gives rise to thoughts, which leads to actions. That's the deepest part of ourselves, the energetic currents. Our thoughts ride our energy. Thoughts ride our prana. So if our energy is peaceful, right, we tend to be peaceful. If our energy is heightened and turbulent, could give rise to anger, violence, to something that's not balanced. Peaceful could also lead to anger, which would be more on the wrathful spectrum, which is not meaning wrath as being worse. I'm not going to get too much into this. I feel myself getting off on a tangent. But it's more of a conscious decision that requires a more aggressive expression. Do you see, like yelling at a child who's about to stick his tongue into the electric plug, right? But that's not really wrathful. Let me just drop the wrathful apart. I'm getting off on something else. It's more of a anger, but it has an aligned manifestation to make a clear, shocking reaction in a child so he never does it again. Do you see? There's a wisdom behind it that's aligned, versus having a turbulent energy which leads to anger and yelling and violence just because one is disturbed and actually an angry person, and there's really no wisdom behind it. Actually, there's a lack of wisdom. So that would be an imbalance in the energetic body. So do you see the difference? The same, more aggressive energy could have two different sources, one in alignment and one not. Right? If one's country is invaded, you have to react in an aggressive way to protect yourself. Correct? There's wisdom in that. There's a necessity. The invading person or entity uses a similar aggression, but it's not balanced because it could be motivated by greed or desire, all these things. So it's the motivation is essential, and all of that rides on the energy that's beneath, right? Being peaceful, right, can come from knowledge and abilities of attainment. But being peaceful can also come from depression or the inability to express oneself from the lack of self-esteem, right? But if the situation requires you to express yourself and you don't, that's an imbalance of that energy. Does that make sense? And so a lot of what we're going to be explaining a little bit today is how the alignment is found within the energy of our bodies. And then the Tree of Life teachings takes it a little bit in a different way, but in a similar way. Okay? So when we use a pranayama, we're working directly with the breath to influence the body's nervous system and one's energy body. And that affects our emotions and our thinking, and it could also enhance mental clarity, emotional balance, and physical well-being. So it really works on all three aspects of ourselves that I had mentioned earlier. It's a very powerful technique to really help us along the path that works deeply within our source. Just like the name of God works deeply with our energetic body, the pranayama also does that by working directly with the energetic flows within our body. Aligned energy leads to an aligned thinking, it leads to wisdom. It's all directly related. So we're clearing the blocks, all those little beaver dams, which I mentioned last week, that blocks the proper flow, that fixes us to have a tendency, depending on what the topic is, or having an inherent imbalance in either the lunar or solar sides. And they could block in different chakras. So it could be more of a survival problem, the lower chakras. Could be more of a heart blockage, the middle heart chakras, inability to love and the ability to trust, correct? It could be more of the solar plexus, the ability to act, to manifest, right? Inability to express ourselves, the throat chakra. Inability to attain a sort of transcendent divine wisdom that sees beyond what's normally perceived, the third eye. The inability to connect with divinity and more spiritual, heightened knowledge and feeling connected to the source of everything. That's the crown chakra. So that's this, also the sexual chakra, and the very basic bottom one, which is kind of survival issues. So we see how these things sort of line up to where we can get stuck, and normally we're blocked in several. Some people have more openings in one and then less in the other. For me, my heart chakra never had problems, but I had a lot of problems expressing myself and living in my wisdom and manifestation. That is very much a solar plexus problem, and then the expression aspect is the throat chakra. Right? My third eye never quite had a problem, but so everybody has a little different combination. Okay, so how does one clear everything? And the pranayama sort of helps in that. And even if one doesn't really live in these teachings, as one clears, one begins to feel it in themselves and starts feeling these channels, because we become a little lighter, a little less dense, and one becomes more sensitive to the movement of energy within oneself, and one starts feeling it. And then one grows in confidence that this is true. And as one gets more into alignment, we feel ourselves feeling more aligned and calm. And then we begin to perceive that our thoughts are more in a certain way, more in order, more cleaner, for lack of a better word. And then when we see our actions change, and then you really get confidence in the teachings and in the path, and you realize we're on the right path, going in the right direction. And as these things deepen, we really start seeing levels of attainment and what we would call enlightenment, growing closer to God, closer to a stronger Emmanuel manifestation, as I like to describe it. So let's pick up a little bit where we left off. I wanted to explain the imbalances of the lunar and solar channels, a little bit of what I just kind of led with, and then we're going to quickly move into how this pertains to the tree of life. So in everyday life, most people live through either the solar channels, which means they're more influenced by emotions. So the side channels, we live in either sort of side channel, both, right? So we have a mixture of working on more the lunar and the solar, and they shift. It says that it kind of shifts every 90 minutes, where we're kind of shifting more from one to the other, and therefore our thoughts and our energies kind of fluctuate throughout the day, as we kind of tend to see in our lives. And so we're influenced by fluctuating, by changing emotions, thoughts, and karmic tendencies. And when our energy moves more to the center of us, the balance, our mind becomes clear, stable, and more awakened. And as we live more in that, we dissolve duality and leading more into a non-dual awareness, where ourselves are a little more removed and we just see perfectly, and we enter a place of calm. If we've ever been around a master, a really enlightened teacher, a rabbi or a priest, or one enters into their presence, they feel a deep sense of calm that permeates the room. And that is sort of the energy that one has when one lives really in their center, in alignment with God. So, here's the imbalances. If one lives too much or has an overactive lunar side, it leads to emotional instability. It means overly passive, fearful, depressed, sentimental, or emotionally reactive. It may manifest as a lack of motivation, avoiding challenges, and getting stuck in fantasy or nostalgia. It relates to the elements. It's an excess of water, which is a lunar element. It's heaviness, attachment, and overindulgence in emotions. An overactive solar side is aggression and restlessness. It makes one overactive, aggressive, dominant, driven by ego and control. It leads to overexertion, stress, impatience, and anger, and quite frankly, violence. It's an excess of the fire element, the masculine element, which leads to burnout, hyperactivity, lack of introspection, right? Heart attacks, right? Balance the two. It leads to harmonious action. So someone living only on one side swings between emotional instability or overexertion or aggression. So we fluctuate between the two sides. So we fluctuate a little bit between both. Or somebody could be more dominant on one side. And so true mastery is learning to bring that energy more into the central channel, the Kundalini channel, which leads to more of a neutral energetic flow, the balancing of the lunar and the solar channels, which leads to wisdom and non-reactivity. It doesn't mean you're not active. It means you're not reactive. And the N-O-N, means it's more of a non-dual, wisdom-based reactivity. It's just an action for capital A. Yes? So the lunar is intuitive, meditative, and reflective. The solar is logical, active, and analytical. Lunar, emotions. It's calm, dreamy, sentimental. Solar, fiery, passionate, impulsive. Actions. Lunar, passive and receptive. Solar, active and assertive. Breathing, lunar, left nostril dominance. This is an Indian thing. So it depends on the man or women, as I mentioned, right? So if you're more lunar, you're more dominant on the lunar side. And if you're more solar dominant, you're more dominant on the solar side. Does that make sense? And it has nothing to do with men or female. This is just the energy of the sun and the moon. It's a figurative aspect, but it also works with the sun and the moon. Okay? Well, the energetic aspects of those two. The moon is receptive. The solar emanates, right? The moon reflects the light of the sun, which gives the moon its light. The moon itself doesn't generate light, right? And the moon is more associated with wisdom, and the sun's more associated with manifestation and action, heat, right? So you see how it kind of lines up here, right? So the element for the moon is water, cooling and soothing, right? The sun is fire, warming and energizing. Personality of a more lunar person, gentle, nurturing, artistic. So you see these attributes can work for a man as well. Do you see? And the solar, driven, competitive, and ambitious. Well, women could have those attributes as well. You see? The spiritual state, lunar, deep inner peace, divine receptivity. It means we are more receptive to the divine. We absorb. Solar, manifestation, divine power. Health imbalance for lunar. Lethargy being inability to manifest, having a lack of energy, right? Depression, emotional instability, right? Solar, overexertion, stress, and burnout. The more lunar chakras is the third eye, the crown chakra, and the heart. The more, let's just step out from the heart. Let's just take the heart away. That's more of a balanced one. That's sort of in between. If you're balanced, you can really live from the heart in the proper way. If the heart is out of balance, it could be improper compassion, inability to love or to trust, and a lack of compassion. So, which also could be wisdom. You could have different chakras emanating at the same time. So let's just leave the heart out of it. That's more complicated. So the solar is obviously the solar plexus, the third chakra. That's very solar. And then the root chakra, the one at the very bottom. So we begin to understand the energetic flows and the different places they meet in our body, where the left and right lunar and the solar channels meet and cross over from left to right at our chakras. Does that make sense? So it's a ball of mixture of the two of them, and where we kind of get stuck is kind of where we live. Somebody who's all about themselves and it tends to be more anger and doesn't think about other people, they live in the lower chakras. People who are compassionate, loving, and caring, those are aspects of the upper chakras. And so the trick, for lack of a better word, is to move your energy up from the lower chakras so it flows better to the upper chakras. It's passing that energy that lives at the diaphragm, the muscle that's below the lungs. And to have the proper flow from the lower to the upper. And to increase that flow. And as one increases that flow, one starts living more when one is in greater balance to the central channel. Because the upper ones have a lot of positive aspects. Love, wisdom. Do you see? So by connecting more to this, to the upper ones, the egocentric, aggression, hate tend to be more of the lower chakras. So they purify as one enters into balance energetically. This is why it's important to stretch and do yogas and to do pranayamas and to exercise, because it rectifies, it fixes the energetic imbalances in our bodies. So it's not just a prayer or just the intent. We begin to work on all aspects of ourselves and bring it all onto the spiritual path. It makes it much easier. Our actions can help bring inner alignment, but it's much harder from going to the outside inward. It helps, but it's much easier to go from the inside outward, because that's the root of it. Why we do improper actions is because our thinking is off from a wisdom, divine, more aligned judgment. And our thinking is off because our energy isn't in alignment. And why is it? Because our channels aren't in alignment, and therefore we have stockages, blockages in different chakras. You see, our energetic bodies are the foundation of our physical bodies. Makes sense, doesn't it? These are teachings of more Eastern. It doesn't make them wrong. It just means they focused on certain aspects that more Western traditions have not. And with a more flow of knowledge throughout the world, we can take pieces of knowledge that certain cultures have cultivated that we have not necessarily focused on, and vice versa. And we benefit from it. And when I was younger, I thought this was ridiculous when I heard it. But as I went into my path and worked with imbalances in my body, and boy, I had a lot of them, I began to feel this, and it manifested in my life as I began to work on myself through therapy energetic things, healing my body, healing my mind. And I began to realize that I could vouch for everything I just said through my own personal experience. And other people can as well. So if this seems a little out there, just keep an open mind, follow the practices, and then as you do reflection, as you think about what's going on and what's changing in your life with these practices, you can contemplate if it's lining up with some of what I say here. And then if you start getting confidence, and then you can grow in your understanding as what's going on, and that will help you in your path. And then you can focus, oh, I really have a block here. And then you could see what helps with blocks in that particular spot. And then you could dive a little deeper and focus on those aspects you have issues with. And that could help you to go faster and deeper and in a more profound way of healing. So you see how that works. We have to bring all aspects of ourselves onto the spiritual path. It makes it much easier. Like you're driving your car, it's not just the steering wheel. You need to have good brakes, a good engine, a good electrical system. The fluids need to flow properly in the engine, right? The door can't fly off, right? You know, it's a good exhaust system, enough air in the tires. It's a whole system. And this is bringing in the whole system to our lives and becoming aware of pieces that we don't realize existed, and therefore we don't know how to work with them and how to heal them. So when energy flows smoothly, excuse me, through the central channel, as the blockages leave from the solar and lunar sides, they tend to flow more in the central channel. And there's not an imbalance. And it leads to greater perception of reality, heightened awareness, and deeper wisdom. One starts living in a state of higher consciousness and has a more spiritual awakening. You do no longer see the world or one's life or one's purpose in life as most people do. You start living in a higher frequency. So how you perceive, how you think becomes different. It's a different vibrational living. You have greater inner stillness. The mind is peaceful, free from emotional turbulence, attaching and craving. Like, I gotta have desire, right? An imbalanced desire. One has desire for food, right? But having too much food, too much, more food than one can eat, or overeating, right? So that's an imbalance, right? One starts to have true presence and a flow state. One lives in the flow. You have full immersion in the present moment. One doesn't live in the future or the past. One is very much present. And you operate in a very effective way, and your ego, your sense of self, your imbalanced desires, the sort of aspects of ourselves that we're trying to clear up a little bit, doesn't interfere with how we live our lives as much. We live in a cleaner, more aligned way. And when we harmonize the solar and lunar energies, we don't have an imbalance in our hyperactivity or aggression, or we don't tend to go into lethargy, lack of energy, or being emotionally overwhelmed. So that enters into balance. we have a sense of unconditional love for all beings, a connection to divine will, and effortless kindness. We're in the flow, so all this just naturally manifests. There's no effort anymore. You use the effort and desire to attain it to move along the path, but at some point, like I've mentioned in the past, you just drop into it and it becomes easier. Life becomes easier. Life takes less of our stress because it just comes from a flow. There's just less of an intent. We live less from our minds and more from an inner knowledge and wisdom, and we just trust our inner instincts on what to do because we've cleared up impurities. So it becomes our instincts and our I felt to do this actually is aligned with our true cathedral within, and therefore we can give into it more. As opposed to before we do our work, if we just like, I feel to do this, well, a lot of that is, the feeling is an ego-based feeling, and therefore it's not purified. Do you see? So, a quick, what I call the 1970s quick sort of dangerous statement, live in the present and let go. Yes, if you've done your work, that is the proper instruction. But if you haven't done your work and you haven't purified, that will cause you to crash your car because you need to use your mind as to what's good or bad. You haven't transcended the mind. You haven't transcended your disturbed energies that make your motivation. You let go, well, you let go to everything that's messed up in you. Do you see? And that becomes a very, 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 very extremely dangerous statement. And that's why they are secret teachings. Not to keep things hidden, but they could be misunderstood. The same statement said to one person at one aspect of their path and said something to someone else who's at a different level of the path can be wonderful healing truths and could be like a medicine to help, and to someone else could be the deepest, most destructive poison imaginable that could lead to destruction. You see? So that's why it's important to study and to learn, because you start realizing how things we've learned in our society, how to see the good aspect, but also see the danger. So we don't give in to pop culture thinking that really requires a deeper knowledge to understand, but most people don't realize that. So by realizing that, we grow in our wisdom, W, and we grow on taking and nourishing ourselves with proper fruits that are in our society, and we have knowledge as to what's more of a poison fruit, and therefore we don't ingest it. Does that make sense? And that could change depending where we are in our spiritual progress, and also recognizing certain things are just never to be touched because they're just not correct. And our society has a mixture of all of that. And there are spiritual teachings that look great, but are actually very, very destructive and can never be for good. And there's ones that are a mixture of both. And then there's ones that are great depending where you are on the path. And so you have to be very careful. Right? And receive the proper knowledge to indicate where a teaching would fit on the path, where it would be good and where it would be bad, just like I described. Right? So there's heightened intuition when one lives in the central channel, the ability to receive insights and guidance that's beyond logical reasoning, trusting a deeper inner knowing. It's more of a third eye aspect. Okay? The ego begins to dissolve, and there's a non-attachment to things. You're living more in an aligned way. So there's less identification with personal struggles, opinions, or emotions. There's a greater freedom from suffering from these things. There's less of an attachment to physical objects. Doesn't mean they're not important, but if you lose it, you realize it's the flow of life, and you are able to enter into equilibrium in an easier way. Does that make sense? You're more in the flow, and you realize there are waves, and good times and bad times, and gain, and then there's loss. And one realizes that's the cycle of life, and you have more of a openness to that cycle. And the next one, effortless manifestation and synchronicities. So you live in a flow of alignment with a divine order, and things fall into place without resistance. Because we're living in a frequency of alignment, and it's just, things just tend to fall into place like magic. And then one begins to realize you do direct yourself into a certain direction, but you realize that everything will fall into place with your effort, so there's less of a fear. You realize that things are going to come maybe together, and you have the wisdom to see when they might not. So there's just more of an awareness and living from a place of stillness. And things have a tendency of falling into place when one lives from that place. So if energy fails to fall properly into the central channel, people tend to experience spiritual stagnation. That means no progress on a spiritual religious path, disconnection, and instability. There's a lack of clarity for one's life purpose, feeling lost or directionless. There tends to be a sense of false spirituality or spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid spiritual growth, denying emotions instead of integrating them. We're going to speak more about the use of emotions, something I've never touched upon. It's working more with energy, and so you see why working with emotions is a more advanced concept that really we haven't really worked on before. But now that I've touched about deeper energetic teachings, then we can work on how to work with emotions. So you see how there's a way of ordering teachings so they make sense. And it's not useful to bring in teachings when one doesn't have yet the ability to work with them, right? Working with emotions is an intermediate, medium level, in between beginner and advanced teachings. In that level, one begins to work with the emotions. That's working with the thoughts and feelings that ride on top of the energy, and emotions give rise to actions, right? So when one lives more in the central channel, you have if one lives less in the central channel, you have an inability to focus or integrate insights. You have scattered thoughts and unstable awareness. You feel detached and ungrounded. You float through life without anchoring into responsibilities, relationships, or material needs. You have extreme emotional numbness, apathy, indifference, feeling disconnected from joy, love, or deep human experience. Your ego is inflated. You have spiritual arrogance, seeing oneself as superior due to spiritual experiences, losing humility and compassion. You have energy blockages and Kundalini issues. This is mainly what we've been discussing. And we see with everything above how blockages and Kundalini issues give rise to everything I've just discussed. If Kundalini rises too quickly without balance, it could cause severe mental, emotional, or physical distress, which is why I say go slowly. You have to work through these issues. This helps work with the energy, but thoughts and emotions will come up. Memories will come up. And so you have to kind of address it. And as you do that, that frees up your vital life force. It makes you healthier. It takes care of possible diseases that might arise in the future because there's energetic imbalances. And it's very easy to take care of that now before the disease forms, and much harder after the disease has already taken root and manifested. And so you work with these things, and it takes time. You might need to see psychotherapy. You might need to see an acupuncturist. You might need to do EMDR or realize that you have a chemical imbalance in your body and you need modern medicine, that there's always been an imbalance. You've always had ADHD, so you need some of that medication. Or you realize, hold on, I've always had bipolar tendencies, and then you need to maybe take that medicine. So you're not negating Western modalities. You're availing yourself of what you need to help heal your energetic system. Pranayamas help if that's something that's good and healthy for you. And I gave some caution on that last week. Yoga helps. A skilled acupuncturist works directly with energetic systems. Look, I call that nuclear medicine. Find a good one. He should be Eastern trained, and don't pick a beginner. I'm all for training and helping youngins get knowledge and abilities, but that is something you need to find someone who's been done it for at least a decade or two. It fundamentally really aligns your energies and heals blockages in a very, very profound way. And yes, it is real, and yes, it does work. And I've done it, and by God, it really helped. But you really need to find somebody who does it well. Deep massage helps align the movement of energy in your body, because muscles and tendons and joints out of alignment directly affect our energy. So all of this brings harmony. When we're in harmony, our energy flows through the central channel. Saying the name of God brings in the blessings and the vibration of His sacred name, whichever one you wish to use. That emanates a frequency in our body. Even if we say it silently within us, or we say it slightly under our breath, that it's not audible, or we say it out loud so it can be heard, all of that is a vibration, and vibration affects energy. Energy is a form of vibration. Think about it. And you emanate, and that heals as well. Sitting still stills the mind. Stilling the mind calms the energy. When things are calm, things flow into the central channel. Disturbed energies calm down, become cooler and more balanced. If you're locked into something depressive, it helps things kind of move. That depression tends to move. It tends to clear. Do you see? And that movement and that clearing is the beaver dams, the blockages in our channels start to erode, and there's a proper flow in that movement. And that's why it can give rise to flashbacks, give rise to memories of things that messed us up in the past. It could also give rise to emotions. You process the depression and you realize it's based in grief because you never mourned your mother properly. And the next thing you know, you're in mourning and you're sobbing over your mother. That's energy that's blocked, that needs to give expression. You should mourn and sob to that mother, because that's a release of blocked energy. Now, if it's day 5 and you stopped eating, you've got a problem. It's too much, too far. You're now out of balance in something else. You didn't. But if you still feel depressed for a couple of weeks, well, that's the processing of a death that you've never experienced. If it gets too severe, that's when you go to a therapist and you help find the balance, or you go to a massage therapist to help ease these energies to kind of flow and not get stuck into a fully depressive state. But then if you realize you're depressed and then you have an aha moment, be like, hold on, I think I've been sort of depressed my whole life. Do I have an imbalance? And you go to a psychiatrist and see if you really have an imbalance, and maybe a little anti-depressive pill, right, might help boost what was always an imbalance in your mind, but you've never, ever really seen it. And then you grow in wisdom and you realize, oh, you know what? For whatever happened in my youth or genetically, I'm not at the same level as other people. And then you take it, and 2-3 weeks later, you're like, oh my God, this is what the world like is when you're not depressed. And then you're just shattered, because you're like, oh my God, there's a whole other way of being. Oh my God, I have more energy. Oh my God, thank God I took that pill. And that's why it's important to realize sometimes you have to go to professionals to get a professional opinion as to whether this is a momentary depression. No, what you're going through for your life, that's just a normal human being way of, the ups and flows. Or realize, no, you're on a depressive spectrum and you have your own life. You just didn't realize it. This is why it's important to find a proper doctor. Doesn't overprescribe, doesn't underprescribe, has the right skills and knowledge to be able to assess. And we grow as to what we are physically, what we bring to the table, and how to work with it. Right? I've just personally have suffered from lack of esteem, unmotivation, depression, lack of confidence. I'm on the improper aspects of the lunar spectrum. To balance, I've had to have lack of working on not having depression, more motivation, confidence in my abilities. Right? I used to think I was mentally retarded. Clearly, as you could hear, I am not. That's a gift from my father and both of my parents. So it's the feeling mentally retarded. So we realize things happen in our youth because our parents were effed up, and we learn to heal. So we are able to have an adult life that doesn't carry that. But you have to have the recognition of what happened and work on finding that balance. I had to bring in solar aspects, confidence, manifestation, and strength to balance out the lunar aspect that was not in balance. As I found that balance, they both flowed again, and it entered the central channel, which allowed a manifestation that balanced both. Well, see, there's a great example, and this is why I use examples from my own life, because it's very clear to me what happened. And so people can take that and find experiences in their own lives and look at their own lives where they have an imbalance, too much anger or whatever. Where does that come from? And what do you need? More patience, more cooling. Anger's too much solar, so you bring in more lunar. So what lunar aspects do you need to cultivate, to bring into your life, to balance out the solar? Less heat, right? Less fire. You need more water. So what's water? What sort of foods even? Do you take too much spices? That's fire. You need more lunar, more bland. You have more fire, alcohol, well, maybe more water. So do you see? So you start working with your diet. You do aggressive sports, football. Well, that's good for releasing stress, but that also cultivates aggression. So maybe finding a different way. Running or swimming, actually swimming would be good because you're actually in water. And you could put your aggression, the excess energy, into that, but it's not competitive. So you're burning it, but it's not a full impact sport. So you're not reinforcing tendencies that keep you in imbalance or make you more in imbalance. Do you see? So by understanding this framework, it opens your awareness as to how to work with yourself. This is why I've spent so much time on this. It gives an understanding on how to work with oneself. If one is depressed, are the blinds shut in your room, which is typical for depression? Well, you need more light. So just by opening the blinds and forcing yourself to take a walk for 30 minutes or an hour, that goes directly against the depression. So the healing is found in solar things because you have too much lunar. You see? So you can work from it, from your actions and how you engage in your life from the outside, which affects your inside. And you could work with aspects of your inside to help your outside. And if you do both, you will quickly arrive, which is why I had the most progress and why the most profound teachings are considered esoteric, because they work from the inside. It requires knowledge, it requires accuracy, it requires clear understanding. But when one learns with these teachings, it really makes quick change. Understanding is 80% of the way there. And this is really the cheat sheet to really understand what's going on with ourselves and how to go about working with it. So briefly to summarize, pranayamas help, chanting and vibrations help, deep meditation, contemplative practices help, balancing material and spiritual responsibilities help. Basically, we're all material in this world, so we need to bring in these teachings to help us. Heart-centered practices, loving kindness, acts of service, charity, compassion. Even if you can't do anything, just feeling sorry or feeling like, oh my God, that's horrible, somebody's going through with this. These are heart-centered practices. It's the upper chakras. So by focusing on the heart, it naturally moves the energy up from lower levels blockages. Where the intention is, where the energy is focused, is where the rest of the energies of the body have a tendency to go to. Hence, you fake the charity, or fake being charitable if you're not inherently charitable, and you will start developing those energies of charity and kindness and looking at others, because the energy is going to start pooling in those areas where those qualities are. Do you see? If you have problems of finding focus, you do actions, meditation and whatever to develop focus, and then the energy tends to go in those centers where focus more lives, the third eye and crown chakra. And you develop the peace that's innate in the heart. And so the imbalance from the fire aspects of ourselves, the first, second, and third chakras, is cooled from more lunar aspects of ourselves, the upper chakras. Do you see how it all works? Yes? So when the lunar and the solar practices enter into balance, it's the path to spiritual awakening and enlightenment. It's not through extremes, but deeply integrating both. I'm going through my notes. So it doesn't mean that the solar and lunar energies disappear, is that they're in alignment so they help regulate the bodily functions and our emotions and ensuring a proper balance. But a lot of our energy is now through this central channel, the enlightenment channel. And then an awakened master, or as we move along our path, we shift between the solar and lunar energies depending on the circumstances and what's needed in that moment, based on wisdom of a clear seeing, of a clear knowing with a capital K, that's not influenced by any sense of ego, and therefore our actions are appropriate for what's needed, more lunar or more solar. It's not triggered, or it's not in balance through blockages, because things are open. Does that make sense? And so, in balanced energies, balanced thinking, balanced assessment, and clear seeing as to what's there, what's needed, what can be done, what can't be done, what we wish we could do, but we know we can't, or what we wish we can do and realize we can. It's very balanced, very awake, very aware, and very rational. It's very smart. Yes? And that manifests directly to the actions we do. There's a direct correlation. It is not influenced by an ego or an improper motivation that puts everything out of balance because somehow we want it a certain way, and then therefore we ignore the way it should be done because that's the way things should be done, and that's what the situation calls for. I think that made everything very clear, that last statement. So by understanding this, now we have a framework to analyze our lives and our actions. We have a sort of script on how it's all affecting ourselves. And now we could contemplate our lives based on this and start understanding ourselves better, seeing where we are out of balance, and working on these different levels on how to work on bringing ourselves into balance. See, my dear friends, the spiritual religious life is beyond just spiritual or religious. It's also working on our thinking and our energy. It brings all aspects of ourselves into that. See? And it doesn't need to be overwhelming or feel like a lot. We're just working a little bit here, a little there, and soon, by working on one dam, right, a little here once in a while, right, well, when that energy flows more, it naturally clears up other dams because the other dams get a little more pressure and then things come through them. Clearing one thing, we think it's only working on one dam, but that dam's linked to 3 or 4 other dams. So by working on one, it actually clears other aspects that we're not as aware of. because it all works as a whole. None of it's really independent. I explain it in a way to make it clear, like they're all distinct, but it's not. Working on more loving kindness and heart blockages naturally clears the fire energy below, which can clear more anger and being overly reactive. I've just described 3 different chakras, if not 4. Do you see? So it all works together. And then we have greater wisdom, so that's the upper chakra. And if we vocalize anger, now we're at the throat chakra. So now I think I've just engaged literally all chakras almost. So it all works together. And by understanding this, we are able to progress on the spiritual path much, much quicker. We watch what we listen to, the lyrics of our songs, because that directly, the energy and the sound affects directly our energy in our body. Does it help heal or disturb or make worse? The words influence our minds, our thinking, which in turn influences our energy and also influences our actions. So we're mindful on what we hear and what we see, what we engage in and what we don't engage in, because we're beginning to see the holistic aspect of ourselves, the complete aspect of ourselves. And we begin to work with everything in our lives to bring things into balance. If one's diabetic, and one realizes one eats too much sugar, which caused the diabetes, we have an imbalance of sugars. If one is hypoglycemic, and one needs a little more sugar to kind of balance things out, they're basically the opposite of diabetes sometimes, but sometimes it's a precursor to diabetes, but sometimes it's not. You could bring in a little more sugar, which makes you feel better, and therefore you have energy and you don't feel lightheaded and you don't go into a cold sweat. So do you see? It's all about finding the different things you need a little more, and it changes from person to person. So this was really needed to be said. It really completes the Kundalini teachings. The tree of life, my dear friends, which quite frankly these teachings really are something, we'll have to wait for next week, because I have spoken for an hour and a half, and that is more than enough. The tree of life deserves its own Sunday. And I thought I would go through the Kundalini, and I thought it'd be much, much faster. But honestly, they needed to be explained properly, and I think you could understand why. When I give a teaching like this, I like to make it complete. I think it's confusing when teachings are spread across several months in little bits and pieces, because it's hard for people to kind of find those little bits and pieces in different teachings. And when they're not presented together, it's harder to understand how they all fit together. I think the teachings of a little bit of what I gave in October about this combined, and I think the link of October is in 2 weeks ago, and as a sort of attachment in the discussion to the video. And with last week's and this week's, I think you now have a complete teaching as far as you really need about the subtle energies of the body and how it works. I think all that's needed is a little more teaching on the chakras, but I can give that in a month or two's time. All of it is understanding. Even if you don't believe these things are real, I bet you every one of you can understand that when I describe the balances and imbalances and how to go about fixing them from a psychological point of view, it's all accurate. It makes sense intellectually. True religious teachings that are correct make sense intellectually. Everything is in alignment. The intelligence, if we have instincts that are clean, our instincts feel that it's correct, if it's proper and aligned and we're not out of balance, which affects our thoughts, right? And it feels right in our hearts, because our hearts have been purified and we have the right instincts there. And it manifests as reality, that it lines up, and it's in fact based on something that's physically real or spiritually real. If something doesn't make sense intellectually, that is at the very least a yellow flag, if not a red one, if that instinct, intellectual, this doesn't make sense, ends up being true. So there is a very real place for the mind. I focused on different aspects because we're too mind-based, and our minds are just not, for lack of a better word, programmed properly based on things that happen in our youth, teachings, pop culture that's just more polluted, or we just never really thought things through completely, or received knowledge that's complete without misunderstanding, or knowledge that is pure and true, right? But that doesn't negate the importance of the mind. Knowledge, proper knowledge, is based on truth. And truths align with inner truths and outer truths. Yeah. So there's a real importance. Eyes open. Always have your eyes open. See clearly. See the truth in things, and that guides you. The intellect and the mind are very important, but don't negate the heart. Don't negate the transcendent wisdom with a capital W that's beyond the mind that we learn to cultivate. And don't negate, meaning ignore, the energies deep within us, our energetic pathways, which affect the energies of our heart, of our mind, and our actions. They're all very important. The energy of God that lives in our inner cathedral, the Shekinah that animates us, is always there. Being balanced is not always there. So we work on the balance, and then we're able to slip back into that inner wisdom, that inner energy that's always there. And then everything with us enters into balance. And as we walk on our path, we enter into balance more and more, and that's called healing. And we progress spiritually. Our lives become easier, more beautiful. We appreciate it more. We have better relationships. We make better decisions. So our lives can be healthier by realizing medicines that are good or bad, realizing we have a great doctor or we have a really bad one and we need to find a new one, realizing how to fix our relationships, realizing how to go about maybe manifesting more wealth if that's what we need, or realizing we have too much pursuit of wealth because we have more than enough and we need to balance on other aspects of our lives that we are negating, or realizing we're not living in a safe neighborhood and we need to move into a more safe neighborhood. And so we're less complacent. We're less, well, this is what it is, and you're not moving because you're stuck. As opposed to having the wisdom to seeing, I'm just too stuck, I'm too attached here, that's not wise. So that's the developing of the wisdom. You see, the third eye, clear seeing. And that's developed by perceiving oneself in a clear, objective way. We do not judge ourselves. That's not helpful. It's just saying, oh, okay, this is what it is. Oh, this is what happened. Not trying to get into the anger and resentment that this happened, but sometimes you have to clear that. But by realizing, okay, this is what happened. This is how it affects me now. Oh, this is an imbalance I have, and this is how it affects me now. Oh, this is an imbalance I've developed through my own decisions, and this is how it affects me now. So in the present, I am like this. The knowledge of how it came about and how we are today helps educate and guide us on how to fix it. And we make decisions through our knowledge or reaching out for help or techniques on how to enter into proper balance today, so in our future we are able to go beyond that and live in a better way that's in balance. We have our future to work towards. So all of this helps us to repair, so we have a better tomorrow, better body, better relationship, better lives, better enjoyment. And that is higher frequencies. And we live in a greater harmony, which is ultimately aspects of divinity. So, that is it for today. I have said a lot. I hope it blesses and helps all of us. I know it helps me to go through this and present it, because everybody has aspects here, and this knowledge helps us make our decisions, and decisions today lead to results tomorrow. So next week, the Tree of Life. I hope you're all working on your pranayama. You can go with deeper and deeper breaths and increasingly more forceful exhales. As opposed to a light exhale, the exhale becomes a little more intense, a little faster, a little stronger. Go slowly. You have time. But, you with awareness and contemplation after the practice, and contemplating for a day or two after practices and seeing what the results are, you'll know when to go in a more aggressive, intense use of the breath, from a breath being more like this to a very deep inhale or holding to a full exhale where there is no more air in your lungs that deep, to a more intense inhale and exhale like this, to a very deep exhale like this, where there's no air in your lungs anymore. Let me do it to the other side so I'm balanced, right? So this is a deep lunar exhale. You want to always be in balance, so that has to be followed by a very deep solar exhale, right? So for me, it's now an exhale through the left side. So I inhale with both, deep through both nostrils. I'm holding it. I'm holding it longer so the pressure builds. And then block the nose. Holding it tight, deep, releasing. So I did one. So you do that 3 times. Now do you see the more intense aspect? When you're ready. There's one last piece I haven't given yet. Just one last instruction on how to do the exhale through both nostrils. But right now, you just do it sitting up. So the last 3 ones are through both, right? An inhale. Holding. Both nostrils open. No blockages. Exhale through both. See? Greater intensity. Filling up the full lungs to the extent you can. A longer hold so you really feel that pressure build on both sides of the inhale and the exhale. And at the end, just a relaxation in being. That will move the prana quite fast. But you've got to have to be ready for the pressure. You're building the pressure of the water against the dam. And the exhale, and even the inhale, is blowing through the blockages. Do you see? That's a full pranayama practice. When you're ready. That's what you're working towards. And remember, the exhale isn't a direct exhale through the nose. It has more of a... Do you remember? It has a more of a... You're kind of throwing it up more through the sinuses down than just trying to get the quick path through the nostrils. So it's mainly you're going to know you're doing it well through the sound. So a normal exhale through the nose is... More exaggerated exhale, which brings into play more of the energies, is like this. Do you see how it's deeper? That captures more energy. Okay? So I wanted to give that instruction so you see, have the knowledge, right, of how a more intensive practice sounds like and the instructions of it. So that's what you're working towards. If it is skillful and proper for you to move to that more full direction. And only you can assess that. Be cautious. If you go full, I wouldn't do it the next day. I would see how it's processed through too much emotions, or you feel hyper engaged or too reactive. Then you know. But if it's something you could manage, then fine. Wait a couple days until it subsides, then do it once again, and then see if it comes up. And if it doesn't, and you feel comfortable, then you do the pranayama 2 days in a row. See what happens. Oh, it's all normal. Then you do it 3 days in a row. If that works, great. Then you keep doing it. And you're good. And it naturally flows and unblocks without having the more reactive imbalances. But be prepared. One day, 1 month later, just doing it that once might unblock things. And then if it does, then you know not to do it the next day until you're able to process and integrate all those energies into your body. And you're integrating life force back into your body that was blocked. It will make you healthier. And you will realize with those blockages cleared, you think better, you're less reactive, you're more in balance with the lunar and the solar. It may just be energy, or it might trigger thoughts, emotions, memories, good or bad. So be prepared. Energy has thoughts attached to it. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes I'm walking and I feel just this release of energy, like boom, and I'm like, oh my God, what in the world was that? And I'm like, oh, that was big. Thank God I did not see the thoughts associated with that. But the energy left. No thoughts. It just left without what it was, which is great. Sometimes it's released with a lot of thoughts. The instruction is, do not get captured into that storyline. You do not need to necessarily revisit it unless it's really stuck. And then you realize there's something there that you need to work through because it's not releasing. Sometimes it takes a day or two and you're sort of in what happened, but you're able to let it go. You do not want to analyze it. You do not want to get stuck there. You do not want to overthink it. The energy needs to go. The thoughts and the memory needs to go. Living in the present doesn't mean living in the past, which are memories. If you need to remember something in your present, because there's something in the past you need to know for your present, your mind will naturally remember it at the time. You don't need to hold on to it to keep it present. Your mind will just naturally pull it up if you need it. That's a balanced mind. So something comes up, you try to relax, try to breathe, and just try to let it go. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean it wasn't important. It doesn't mean it wasn't traumatic. It just means holding on to it is really unhealthy and not helpful to the present moment, and can bring up energies in your present moment of anger and depression and abuse or whatever it is. And the feelings of powerlessness and all of this, which are everything that's imbalanced needs to just be cleared. So something comes up, try to let it go. Now, if you remember something that's big and you're like, oh my God, this is something I need help with, that's when you bring in the help. Do you see? Do you see how it's all imbalanced in things? Do you see why pranayama is so important and so powerful? So you go with it slowly, carefully, with wisdom. What can I release? Or what is really stuck? And you always had memories, but now you just realize how important and how it influences you and how the energy is really stuck there. And then you realize, you know what, I need to talk this through with a professional now, or speak to a friend about it, just to help process it. And also having the wisdom when like, I'm not processing this, I'm just going to let this go. And the wisdom of knowing where that will work, or you're just fooling yourself and it's just not going to go. Ultimately, energy will just start flowing, the thoughts will come, the memories will come, and it will just naturally flow out. They are memories of the same things that are coming up continuously, and I just can't seem to let it go. And I may never. But it ain't a problem, because they come, they surface, they go. Their emotions are less heavy, their emotions are less intense, and the emotions don't really cause a problem with today. Though it might cause a couple minutes of remorse or whatever, or anger, but then it comes and it goes because the energy flows. The energy clears. The energy doesn't get stuck. And I don't hold on to it. And the more it flows and the more it comes and the more it goes, the less the tendency that it's going to come back, because whatever's there is clearing and letting go of itself. Does that make sense? I'm heavily processed. I've done it for a while. So there's very little that can come up from my past that's really going to get me stuck, because I've dealt with it and some of the issues for years. And some of it I had to do psychotherapy to help work through. But I've done it and now it flows and I'm no longer stuck. The energy is flowing through the left, right channels and up the front. But it doesn't mean that things don't stop coming back. That's the human condition. But we've learned to come into balance. And it doesn't mean that I'm not out of balance for sometimes weeks at a time. Well, you know, we all have our issues, right? And we're all on the path. But we learn the techniques on how to work with it. And we have the modalities, medicine or not, or exercise or not, when to speak about it and when just to deal with it and let it come through. And therefore we have the skills. And we become proficient. So I hope this helps. This is a lot of talking. This is very heady, but it's very, very, very important, because now you're empowered. Now you have knowledge on how to work with what we are, to work with where we are today, and how to work towards a better, happier, more aligned, healthier future, which is in keeping with Hashem's desire for us and helps us grow closer to Him. Because Hashem, Yahweh, Emmanuel, Elohim, whatever you wish to call God, wants us to be happy, wants us to have wonderful, fabulous lives, wants us to know love, companionship, relationship, wants us to have a good relationship with the animals and with nature, wants us to be in balance. He wants us to have an Eden, or have as close to an Eden as possible while here. And by doing this, we really align to a pure way of being, which is exemplified in the tree of life, which will come next week. So my dear friends, thank you so much for joining with me this week. I pray that these teachings, the last 2 days, and all my teachings are of benefit to you. And let's just take a moment to pray at the end. I think it's really important. We can pray and ask for things too to God. And let's just pray together that we all have a beautiful week. That God's blessings fall on us and bless us and our families and our world. That we can be happy and have a wonderful, beautiful week and know what it's like to feel uplifted and living in God's splendor and Shekinah, in His light, uplifted, wise, healthy, and whole. So let's pray that, both for ourselves, for everyone who is part of the HP Shalom family, I guess, and everyone in the world. So let's take a moment and pray that together and ask God to make that come true, reality. So let's pray together. First, start with yourselves, then work to others you know, and then others in our group, and then to the whole world. So you start personal, never neglect yourself. Always appropriate to pray for yourself. You're the center of your universe. It is so important. You are blessed and loved by God. And then you work and you build outwards. So why don't you just do it easy, whatever you feel. I just wanted to give that instruction. It's very important. So just pray how you wish, and just pray to God and ask Him to bless us all. Yahweh, bless us. Bring healing to us in our world. Be with us always, in everything we do, in everything we are, and in everything we aspire to be. Amen. Thank you for joining me this week. I wish you a wonderful and blessed week. And I look forward to being with you all next week. Bye-bye.